Hi, I'm Bakhtiar Sanov and you are watching AnewZ. Let's see the top stories shaping our world. Russian drone attack on Kharkiv kills 3 as Zelensky hails fresh EU sanctions on Russia. 3-day mourning declared in Austria following a school shooting in Graz. US President Donald Trump says the National Guard will remain in Los Angeles until there is no longer danger. Ukraine's second-largest city, Kharkiv, has suffered another attack. A Russian drone assault overnight has left at least 3 people dead and at least 60 injured, including children.
Kharkiv, just 30 kilometers from the Russian border, is once again reeling from destruction. A deadly Russian drone assault on Ukraine's second-largest city has left at least 3 people dead and dozens injured, 7 of them children. Kharkiv mayor says that the overnight attack lasted just 9 minutes, but in that short span, 17 drones rained destruction across the city. Fires engulfed 15 apartments in a 5-story residential block in the Slobodski district.
Kharkiv is under attack yet again. 17 Shahed drones hit the city. As of now, 3 5-story apartment blocks are damaged. Also, private dwellings and industrial enterprises were hit.
There was a fire. I felt the smoke. I got out. I didn't have a chance to take any documents or money. There was a lot of smoke. It was impossible to stay in smoke and look for something.
Regional Governor Oleh Sinyahubov says the large-scale attack also struck a trolleybus depot, several vehicles, playgrounds and local businesses. Ukraine's Air Force later claimed that its air defences intercepted 49 of 85 drones launched by Russia overnight. The Ukrainian State Emergency Service also said that the Russian army carried out an airstrike on Odessa and Sumy in Ukraine. This latest assault in Kharkiv follows one of the most intense weeks of Russian bombardments since the war began. Just days earlier, 4 people were killed and 40 injured in a series of attacks on the same city. Russia has not commented on the strike.
Ukraine returns the bodies of over 1,200 soldiers from Russia and sends back 27 bodies of Russian soldiers. Kremlin aide Vladimir Medinsky says exchanges of seriously wounded prisoners began on Thursday. Bodies from 6 regions, including Kharkiv, Donetsk and Kursk, are now with forensic teams. The Red Cross and Ukrainian officials coordinated the transfer following the Istanbul agreements. Following the latest attack on Ukraine, the European Commission has unveiled a sweeping new sanctions package against Russia. It's 18th since the start of the war. The proposal aims to further choke Moscow's energy revenues and financial sector.
The European Union is stepping up pressure on Moscow with a fresh set of sanctions aimed at Russia's energy industry and financial system.
Russia's goal is not peace, it is to impose the rule of might. Therefore, we are ramping up pressure on Russia because strength is the only language that Russia will understand.
Among the key proposals is a transaction ban on the Nord Stream gas pipelines, blacklisting more ships from Russia's shadow fleet, and a cut to the G7 oil price cap. The goal is to limit Moscow's revenue from oil exports, which can be used to finance military activities, while still allowing the oil to be traded globally.
There is no return to the past. We also propose to lower the oil price cap from $60 to $45 per barrel. Since the oil cap was introduced in 2023, oil prices have gone down.
But Ukraine's president says it's still not enough, and he's calling for a tougher cap of just $30 a barrel.
It would force them to seek peace, because no other argument works. I know some partners are discussing compromise figures, but enough compromises with Russia. Every compromise delays peace. We are asking for a real reduction in the price of Russian oil. That is how we truly bring the war closer to an end.
The proposed measures will be discussed by G7 leaders in Canada, with EU officials pushing for a united front.
My assumption is that we do that together as G7. We have started that as G7. It was successful as a measure from the G7, and I want to continue this measure as G7.
Moscow, meanwhile, has extended its ban on oil sales to any buyer complying with the Western cap. EU nations will begin debating the sanction package this week, but internal divisions remain, with countries such as Slovakia and Hungary expressing concern over how this will impact them at home.
The Austrian city of Graz is in mourning after a suspected gunman killed 10 people in a secondary school shooting on Tuesday. Police believe the 21-year-old suspect took his own life in the school bathroom.
A city in mourning. Graz Hauptplatz has become a sea of silence, lit only by candlelight. Residents gathered here after Austria's deadliest school shooting, where a former pupil opened fire, killing 10 people before turning the gun on himself.
When you hear about it, you have so much sympathy for the people. Maybe you could have known someone, you know, people in your circle who knew people, and this is an example of solidarity, and you grieve together, and together it is easier to cope.
As candles burned and prayers were said, the cathedral held a silence that echoed across a country still coming to terms with the shock of it all.
Wir tragen gemeinsam das Unerträgliche.
We bear the unbearable together, says the bishop. Elsewhere in Graz, hundreds queued to give blood, desperate to help in any way.
I'm here because I wanted to do something. I felt helpless with the news, and I decided to come to at least give something from what I can give to the situation.
We all can't believe it, and it feels like a nightmare. We are shocked. The whole city is shocked.
The suspect, a 21-year-old, had once been a student at the school. Authorities say he acted alone, his motive still unclear. A period of national mourning begins today for 3 days. For now, people gather, not for answers, but to be together in the silence left behind.
Police and military forces are scaling up their presence as a curfew kicks in for Los Angeles amid nationwide protests over the U.S. government's immigration crackdown. President Donald Trump defends the move as necessary to protect national security and enforce the law, despite growing backlash from state leaders and immigrant rights groups.
Tensions escalated in Los Angeles on Tuesday as California Highway Patrol officers arrested 67 anti-immigration and customs enforcement protesters who had entered the US 101 freeway, prompting officials to declare a public safety threat. The arrests came after demonstrators refused orders to disperse, with officers detaining individuals and loading them into patrol vehicles. The protest, one of several erupting across the nation, targeted ongoing ICE raids and US President Donald Trump's hardline immigration policies.
We are all here and thriving because of people immigrating from other countries should speak for itself. And the way that our families and communities have been apprehended and torn apart demonstrates a lack of understanding and ignorance of our history and basic economy.
This is basic human rights. They're arresting people that are working, they're arresting people at school, at graduation. That's sad and it's heartbreaking. We don't feel safe. We're standing up for the children that can't stand up for themselves or their parents.
On Tuesday, the president used a speech honoring soldiers to defend his decision to deploy troops to LA.
Generations of Army heroes did not shed their blood on distant shores only to watch our country be destroyed by invasion and third world lawlessness here at home, like is happening in California. As Commander-in-Chief, I will not let that happen. It's never going to happen.
Similar scenes unfolded in Chicago where demonstrators clashed with police, leading to arrests amid attempts to breach security lines. Solidarity protests were also held in Atlanta and Washington, D.C., amplifying a nationwide outcry against the administration's immigration crackdown. Street protests in Los Angeles began Friday and have mostly remained peaceful, concentrated within a few downtown blocks. However, confrontations with law enforcement have grown increasingly tense since the military deployment. Trump has vowed to step up deportations and bolster ICE operations, setting a daily goal of 3,000 migrant arrests, a move critics say targets vulnerable communities and fuels public unrest.
Joining us to unpack the political implications of this crisis is Diogo Castro Silva, a political analyst based in Sao Paulo. Diogo Castro Silva, welcome to the program and thank you for joining us.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Diogo, how do you interpret the political motivations behind the recent intensification of immigration raids in the United States?
So you need to see this episode in two layers. One is the immediate question that this is a crisis that the president wants. There were protests, of course, because of the aggressive deportation policy, but local authorities were managing that, and in fact, the governor of California did not ask for any federal support to do that. So in a way, this is a manufactured crisis by using the army, not only the National Guard, but also active units. And with that, you have an escalation. And that is precisely what looks like President Trump wants. The second part is in Kremlin parlor is about the vertical of power of the president himself. The US is a federal system. So not only the federal government has limitations in intervening in the states, but the states have significant autonomy in pursuing their policies. What it seems is behind this is taking away the power of the states in terms of law enforcement, and that concentration of power then can be used for other purposes down the line, let's say when the elections in 2026 come, and you can have more latitude to declare emergency, suspension of votes, and other things that this concentration of power allows.
Diogo, from your perspective in Latin America, how are these developments being viewed, particularly in countries with large diasporas in the United States?
Well, I think it's a good question because, in a way, the United States is becoming much more Latin American in its politics. So it's a good hook to answer your question. I think the main country that is, of course, affected is Mexico because of being a neighbor and having the largest community. I mean, I think we are too early to see any big effects of solidarity with the people in the US being deported. You see something, but I would not say it's very relevant. What will be interesting to see is the political effects in the legal immigration community in the US going forward, knowing that a lot of them voted in quite expressive numbers for Trump in the 2024 election.
Diogo Castro Silva, thank you very much for your valuable insights. We appreciate your time and perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
US and Chinese officials have reached an agreement on a trade framework seeking to ease trade tensions following a two-day trade talks held in London. Commenting the deal, Trump said the United States is getting a total of 55% of tariffs and China is getting 10%.
The United States and China have agreed on a trade framework as both sides seek to de-escalate trade tensions. Top officials from Washington and Beijing held talks in London for 2 days in which China's exports of rare earth minerals were high on the agenda. The US has previously blamed China for being slow to release exports of rare earth metals and magnets, which are essential for manufacturing everything from smartphones to electric vehicles. Officials say the agreed framework should resolve restrictions on rare earth minerals and magnets.
I think both sides had extra impetus in order to get things done because we both have our presidents behind us, pushing us to make sure we take care of our respective sides.
Over the last couple of days, the Chinese and US teams have had in-depth exchanges. Our communication has been very professional, rational, in-depth and candid. The two sides agreed in principle on the framework for implementing the consensus of the two heads of state in their phone call on June 5th, as well as the consensus of the meeting in Geneva.
The latest round of talks followed a long-anticipated phone call last week between US President Donald Trump and Chinese leader Xi Jinping. Both sides engaged in an economic standoff after Trump announced sweeping tariffs on imports from a number of countries earlier this year, with China being the hardest hit. The Asian country responded with retaliatory levies. The US and Chinese officials will now take the proposal from the London talks back to their leaders for approval before it can be implemented.
The European Union, as well as 5 other nations, have lobbied against the new US national security tariffs on imported commercial aircraft, warning of a risk to supply chains and ticket prices.
5 countries, the European Union, and several major airlines have urged the Trump administration not to impose new national security tariffs on imported commercial aircraft and parts. Airlines and aircraft manufacturers have been lobbying US President Donald Trump to restore the tariff-free regime under the 1979 Civil Aircraft Agreement that has yielded an annual trade surplus of $75 billion for the US industry. Since April, airline companies are paying a 10% tariff on imported planes and parts. The US Department of Commerce also started an investigation whose aim is to check if imported parts are a risk to national security. If this is the case, the American government will increase the tariffs even more. Mexico said in 2024 it exported $1.5 billion in aircraft parts, just a tenth of the total, to the United States. The EU said it took US exports of aircraft worth roughly $12 billion, while exporting about $8 billion of aircraft to the US. Countries including Canada, China, Japan, and Switzerland have expressed concerns about the potential fallout from such tariffs on the global aviation industry. The Chinese government said in a statement that no country should attempt to support the development of its domestic aircraft manufacturing industry by suppressing foreign competitors. Delta Airlines has warned of the tariffs' impact on ticket prices, aviation safety, and supply chains. Meanwhile, the United Auto Workers Union, which represents 10,000 aerospace workers, said it supports the tariffs on domestic production quotas in efforts to safeguard the entire aerospace supply chain across the commercial and defense sectors.
The World Bank is warning against a significant growth slowdown, the worst since the 1960s. The organization says that trade tensions, tariffs and policy uncertainty are dragging forecasts down for 2025 and beyond.
World Bank is forecasting the slowest decade of growth globally since the 60s. In its latest global economic report released on Tuesday, the bank trimmed its global growth estimates to 2.3% in 2025. Down from the 2.7% forecast made in January. The report cites escalating trade tensions, rising tariffs, and ongoing uncertainty in the global policy direction. It describes the widespread situation as turmoil, caused by trade barriers and slowing investment activity. It says without swift action, living standards could suffer deeply. The report says that nearly 70% of all economies worldwide have had their growth expectations cut since the last forecast 6 months ago. Advanced economies are projected to expand by just 1.2% in 2025, down from 1.7%. For emerging markets and developing economies, the forecast has been trimmed to 3.8%, a 0.3 percentage point drop. The United States is expected to experience a significant slowdown, with growth revised down to 1.4% in 2025, nearly 1 percentage point lower than previous estimates, and just half of the 2.8% growth seen in 2024. The euro area and Japan are both forecast to grow by 0.7% next year, falling 0.3 and 0.5 percentage points short of earlier projections, respectively.
We are expecting global growth to slow to 2.3% this year. This will be the slowest pace since 2008 outside of global recession. While we are not expecting a global recession, the outlook remains sobering. If our forecasts materialize over the next 2 years, the first 7 years of this decade will register the weakest growth rate since 1960s.
The outlook for 2026 has also been revised downward to 2.4% from 2.7%. The report cites US tariffs introduced under Trump as a major cause of the slowdown. The World Bank emphasized that while a modest recovery is expected in 2026 and 2027, global output is still projected to fall significantly short of earlier projections. However, China is one of the few major economies whose growth forecasts for 2025 and 2026 remain unchanged. And recent US-China trade talks in London this week has raised hopes for easing tensions and stabilizing the economic global scenery.
Argentina's Supreme Court has upheld a 6-year prison sentence for former President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner on charges of defrauding the state. The court also confirmed a lifetime ban on her holding public office. The verdict stems from a 2022 case for a fraud scheme that steered public roadwork projects in the Patagonia to a close ally while she was a president.
On Tuesday, Argentina's Supreme Court upheld a 2022 guilty verdict against former President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner, sentencing her to 6 years in prison for defrauding the state and banning her from holding public office. The 72-year-old, who served as president from 2007 to 2015, was found guilty of directing roadwork contracts in the Patagonia region to a close ally during her presidency, a scheme prosecutors called a major corruption scandal. Kirchner has denied any wrongdoing. In a statement on Tuesday, she called the decision wrong and argued that her prison sentence will not improve the lives of everyday Argentines. Despite the conviction, Kirchner had recently announced plans to run in September's legislative elections in Buenos Aires province. The ruling prompted current President Javier Milei to praise the decision as a victory for the country's institutions. Justice. The end. The Republic is functioning, he wrote in a post on social media platform X. A lower court will now be responsible for deciding whether Cristina Fernández de Kirchner, due to her age, qualifies for house arrest rather than serving her sentence in prison. This decision will take into account legal provisions for elderly individuals in Argentina's justice system and could significantly affect how her sentence is carried out. The outcome may also influence the broader political response to the Supreme Court's ruling.
A massive fire has broken out at the Kabeh petrochemical company facility located in the southern Iranian port city of Bandar Dayer. According to initial reports, the fire originated in a methanol tank, resulting in the death of at least 3 people and injuring 10 others to varying degrees. At least 3 people were killed and 10 others were injured. The fire began at around 11:30 a.m. local time. Firefighters and medical teams quickly arrived at the scene. Officials say the incident is serious and the number of casualties may rise. The cause of the fire is under investigation. The Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has arrived in Norway to take part in the 22nd Oslo Forum. Our Turaj Shiralilo has more from Tehran, Iran.
The Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has arrived in Norway to take part in the 22nd Oslo Forum, according to a Foreign Ministry statement released in Tehran on Wednesday. Iran's top diplomat is scheduled to deliver a speech, meet his Norwegian counterpart, as well as the high-ranking delegates in the two-day international event, which has been offering an environment for exchanging ideas and exploring potential solutions to global conflicts since 2003. Supported by its $1.9 trillion sovereign wealth fund, which is the largest in the world, Norway has played a major role in global peace efforts through mediation, peace building, and humanitarian support. The visit by the Iranian foreign minister is significant as the Board of Governors of the International Atomic Energy Agency IAEA is discussing a draft resolution proposed by the US and the European Troika of France, Germany, and the UK on whether to refer Iran to the UN Security Council for reimposition of nuclear sanctions. Araghchi's visit to Oslo also comes ahead of the fifth round of indirect talks between Iranian and US negotiators to be held on Sunday in Muscat, Oman, as Tehran is expected to relay its alternative proposal to Washington about nuclear enrichment and lifting of US sanctions in the upcoming talks. Foreign Ministry Deputy for Political Affairs Majid Takhravanchi told IRNA news agency that Iran's proposal is a general framework to deeper talks and a bid to keep open the window to diplomacy. Turaj Shiralilo, reporting for AnewZ TV, Tehran.
Pilots of the Azerbaijani Air Forces have successfully carried out their latest training flights. Before the exercises began, safety rules were explained to the personnel and the health conditions of the military pilots was checked. The flights were conducted along predetermined routes. The pilots performed takeoffs and landings, as well as complex flying and combat maneuvers at low and medium altitudes. The training exercises aim to improve combat skills. Experienced pilots demonstrated a high level of professionalism during the practical phase, successfully completing their assigned tasks. Azerbaijan's Prime Minister Ali Asadov met with his Uzbek counterpart Abdullah Aripov on June 11th in Tashkent. Both sides praised the strong growth of ties as the countries celebrate 30 years of diplomatic relations. The Prime Minister said that trade between the two countries grew by 41% this year, with over 10 joint projects planned. They welcomed closer cooperation within the Organization of Turkic States and discussed a joint green energy route to Europe. Azerbaijan thanked Uzbekistan for building a school in Fuzuli and noted the recent textile factory in Khankendi. The day before, Uzbekistan's President Shavkat Mirziyoyev met with Prime Minister Asadov. Both agreed to strengthen partnership between the two countries. To explore the significance of this visit and the future of Azerbaijan-Uzbekistan cooperation, we are joined by Rosa Bayramli, leading advisor at the Center of Analysis of International Relations, also known as the AIR Center. Her insights will help us understand the broader context and potential of Azerbaijan-Uzbekistan relations. Rosa Bayramli, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much. Rosa Bayramli, how do you assess the overall importance of the Azerbaijani Prime Minister's recent visit to Tashkent in terms of bilateral diplomacy?
This visit by Prime Minister Ali Asadov to Uzbekistan is a major diplomatic milestone. It's taking place within the framework of strategic alliance, solidified by the Treaty of Allied Relations signed by our presidents in summer 2024. That makes it the thing that makes it particularly important is the focus on implementation. This isn't just about the protocol, it's about the deepening trust and accelerating joint projects in such areas as trade, energy, transport, and security. The timing also matters, as we know the 30th anniversary of diplomatic relations is happening now. But beyond the political and economic dimensions, this relationship is rooted in deep cultural and historical ties. We know that Azerbaijan and Uzbekistan share common Turkic heritage, language affinities, and centuries-old connection in art, literature, and tradition. These foundations make the cooperation more natural and enduring. So we are seeing a mature and forward-looking partnership that's moving from symbolic gestures to concrete strategic cooperation. And it's built not only on mutual interests, but also on shared identity.
Rosa Bayramlı, the term strategic alliance was mentioned during the visit. What could such an alliance realistically entail, and how might it shape regional dynamics?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Should I repeat the question?
Yes.
Okay, the term strategic alliance was mentioned during the visit. So what could such an alliance realistically entail, and how might it shape regional dynamics?
Actually, a strategic alliance is more than friendly ties. It's a structured long-term partnership. In practical terms, this could mean joint military training, defense cooperation, industry cooperation, and shared border security practices, and intelligence sharing also. Economically, it's about harmonizing infrastructure, investment, and trade routes. Diplomatically, it's about aligning regional visions, especially within the platforms of such organizations as Organization of Turkic States. For a broader region, this alliance adds a new dimension. It strengthens Central Asia and South Caucasus cooperation and provides a balance in geopolitics of Eurasia. In the modern world, connectivity and self-reliance are becoming more valuable. So this partnership could be stabilizing and modernizing force for the region. Also, I would like to mention the importance of the cooperation in the sphere of transportation and the importance of middle corridor, which is also very important for bilateral ties. As you know, it connects China to Europe and Central Asia, Caspian Sea and South Caucasus. And Azerbaijan and Uzbekistan are two critical links in this chain. So, as we said, this cooperation is very important, and the strategic alliance that was mentioned is also very important. And these connections in these areas, such as transportation, energy, and so on, are really important in this context.
Rosa Bayramlı, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your expertise on this timely and important subject. We greatly appreciate your time. Turkey will export 48 Khan fighter jets to Indonesia in its largest defense deal yet. The agreement is signed in Jakarta during the Indo Defense 2025 event and later confirmed by President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. The jets will be delivered over the next 10 years with joint production and technology transfer included. Khan is a fifth-generation fighter developed by Turkish aerospace industries, powered by engines made in Turkey. The deal also supports further cooperation in aviation between the two countries. The Turkic world continues to deepen its economic ties in the region. The second Turkic States Trade and Investment Cooperation Forum and Fair has officially opened in Baku, the capital of Azerbaijan. The second Turkic States Trade and Investment Cooperation Forum and Fair opened its doors to visitors in Baku, the capital of Azerbaijan. Building on the momentum of the first fair held in Istanbul last year, this year's edition brings together businesses, institutions and innovators from across the Turkic world to discuss trade, technology and shared economic strategies. The fair serves as a dynamic platform for companies and institutions to showcase products and cutting-edge technologies in more than 20 sectors, from agriculture and energy to digital innovation and fintech.
The main purpose of the Turkish Trade Fair is to ensure that the private sector also benefits from the developing cooperation areas between the Turkic states. The Turkic states cooperate in more than 20 sectors. Product groups are exhibited in more than 20 sectors at the fair. Our aim is to further increase the economic cooperation between the Turkic states. At the same time, we aim to introduce the unknown products of the Turkic states to each other.
This year's forum places particular emphasis on strategic partnerships, branding and innovation. Bilateral business meetings between participating countries aim to turn dialogue into action, with the hope of creating joint ventures, shared brands and cross-border industrial cooperation. With participation from 10 countries and visitors from more than 20 others, the fair also reflects growing international interest in the Turkic region as a unified economic bloc.
That's all we have for now. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to AnewZ for more.